Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy, reporting to you this week from Southern California, where I've been stranded since United canceled all flights back to the East Coast because of Hurricane Sandy. It's tough out here, but I'm bearing up. I haven't been on a date since September 10th, 1979, with anyone other than the woman who eventually became Mrs. Content Guy. I don't really think about dating very much, to be perfectly honest with you, except to occasionally wonder why my 23-year-old son can't meet a nice girl. But I did start thinking about dating a little bit this week, and not just because I've been taking daily walks along the beach here, where it seems like every girl in Southern California is learning to play volleyball. No, I thought about it, believe it or not, because of a story in the Wall Street Journal. And this story in the Wall Street Journal was talking about how men and women, who are single, are finding it increasingly difficult to meet somebody that they want to go out with and spend the rest of their lives with, not because of all the usual stuff, but because Democrats don't want to date Republicans, and Republicans don't want to date Democrats. And basically what this does is, because the country is pretty evenly split, it basically cuts the dating pool down by half, but these people don't seem to care. That's how profound and divisive our politics have become. Even love cannot conquer all. Now, when I saw this piece, it gave me pause, and one of the things I did when I saw it is I did what I usually do, which I called Michael Sansolo, and I said, I got a question for you. Would you date somebody who didn't share your political views? He sort of did what he usually does in these cases. He sighed deeply and said, Kevin, first of all, the odds are we're never going to have to face that question if we're lucky. And second of all, if we ever get to the sad point in our lives where we actually have to think about dating, we'll be so thrilled just to have a woman say hello to us that it won't matter if she's got 3 arms. Now I have to admit that I agree with Michael for the most part. But the thing is, I'm pretty sure that if for some sad reason I ended up by myself, I'm not sure I could spend a lot of time with somebody who wasn't basically in sync with my worldview. I mean, I'm not just talking about politics, I'm also talking about my attitudes towards religion. I'm talking about my attitudes towards food and drink. I'm talking about my attitudes towards baseball. I just don't know that I could be with somebody who was completely different than I was in those cases. But of course, Michael is probably right. And if I end up somehow surviving Mrs. Content Guy, and I hope that doesn't happen, I'll probably end up by myself, sitting on a pier, maybe doing a little fishing, drinking a beer, and pounding out Morning Newsbeat every morning, because I'm not going to give that up. But it occurs to me that while this may be acceptable for people of my age, because listen, I've had more than 5 decades to develop sort of my life views, right? It's not really so acceptable for people who are younger. We all talk a lot about how social media is such a great thing, and listen, social media is a great thing. But it also has created an environment which these kids, they're not even kids, young people, know so much more about each other before they ever get to meet each other. I mean, they're laying everything out there. I'm reasonably sure that my son, my 23-year-old son, would have a real hard time going out with a Yankee fan. But you know something? He's never going to probably find out if it would be worth it to hang out with a really nice girl who's a Yankee fan, because he's not even going to do it. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. For some people it's baseball, for some people it's politics, for some people it's religion, and there's probably a whole host of other things that would disqualify somebody. They're never going to find out because they have so much data at hand. And that's really too bad. When I met Mrs. Content Guy back in 1979, I was a daily newspaper reporter. I'd been raised in an Irish Catholic family. I was making about $6,800 a year, and I had a broken down car. Mrs. Content Guy, on the other hand, well, she worked for a stock brokerage, and she came from kind of a finance-oriented family. And I think the last thing she ever wanted to do is go out with this red-haired guy who really didn't have a lot of prospects at that point. And the other thing is Mrs. Content Guy didn't like Mexican food. I didn't know that. On our first date, I took her out for Mexican food. I went to a Mexican restaurant. She didn't tell me till later that it wasn't really her favorite. That couldn't happen today, or it's a lot less likely that it would happen today, because all these young people are putting so much information about themselves out there that they're not allowing, sort of nature to take its course and to find out what things I'm willing to overlook because this happens to be a wonderful person. Yeah, more than 33 years later, Mrs. Content Guy and I are still together. She's learned to like Mexican food. I'm making a little bit more than $6,800 a year, and she's no longer a stockbroker, and she's an elementary school teacher. Life changes, we've changed with it, and that's a real positive thing. Now, I'm not just getting romantic and sentimental here. In fact, there is a business lesson in all this, and the business lesson is we can't allow ourselves to become so data-driven, so focused on the numbers, so focused on efficiency, that we're unwilling and unable to let magic happen. Okay, I suspect at some level that's exactly what happened with John Browett at Apple, the guy from Dixon's and Tesco who was brought in to replace Ron Johnson for Apple's retail stores. I think he was so focused on efficiency that he wasn't focused on effectiveness. He was unable to see past the data. He was unable to see past the numbers, and he couldn't let magic happen. And magic is really, really important, especially in a retail environment with so much competition out there. Yes, you have to pay attention to the data, but you also have to pay attention to other things. In our work lives, we have to be willing to look past the numbers sometimes. Trust our instincts, trust our guts, trust our hearts, trust our minds, and allow magic to happen. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this Thursday morning. As always, I want to hear what's on your mind.